She is known as the most pitiful girl in the entire small town. If she hadn't happened to cross paths with her boyfriend today, she wouldn't have even known that he actually had a fiancé. The fiancé greets her enthusiastically. Seemingly terrified that his fiancée might discover their secret relationship, Chase hurriedly leads them away from the scene. Now that the secret has been exposed, Chase should at least have the decency to walk away, but instead, he flies into a violent rage. Chase roars as he charges toward Kaya with malicious intent. Kaya tries to seize the chance to escape, but she is violently shoved to the muddy ground by Chase, who pins her down and attempts to assault her. During the desperate struggle, Kaya's fingers scramble frantically through the mud until they touch a hard, solid rock. Her survival instinct overrides all fear as she grabs the stone and uses every ounce of her strength to bash it against Chase's head. Taking advantage of Chase recoiling in pain, she scrambles to her feet and delivers a few more kicks to vent her pent-up fury. Unbeknownst to them, this violent confrontation is glimpsed from a distance by a fisherman returning from the sea. A few days later, two boys discover Chase's lifeless body in the marsh, with the cause of death determined to be a fatal fall from an abandoned fire tower. The scene is far too clean, devoid of any fingerprints or footprints, which makes it obvious to the authorities that this was no accident. The only clue the police have is a single strand of red fiber clinging to the victim's clothing. The town's gossip mill quickly points all fingers at Kaya, as residents testify to having seen the victim with her on multiple occasions. Following the lead, the police track the evidence to the small shack deep in the marsh where Kaya lives and discover a red, hand-knitted hat. The fiber match is perfect, and a heavy charge of first-degree unaliving falls upon her like a suffocating net. If she cannot prove her innocence, Kaya will be facing a lifetime behind bars. Left with no family or friends in the town, Kaya sinks into the darkest abyss of her life. Fortunately, an experienced retired lawyer named Tom hears about the case and decides to extend a helping hand. Facing the only person who might be able to help her, Kaya begins to slowly peel back the layers of her scarred past for the very first time. She was born into a household perpetually shrouded in the shadow of domestic violence. Her father was a heavy drinker who used violence like a weapon, acting as a crushing weight that made the entire family struggle to breathe. One morning, she watched her mother walk away toward the horizon with a vacant, glazed expression while clutching a suitcase, not yet fully understanding what that departure meant. Her mother's exit was only the beginning of the collapse. Over the next few years, she watched her older siblings escape one by one, carrying both the fresh and old physical scars left by their father. After watching her closest brother vanish into the distance, the household was left with only young Kaya and her volatile father. Slowly, she learns the only rule of survival that allows her to coexist with her father. She spent her days hiding in the deep marsh, where the vegetation, the tides, and the wild creatures became her silent and loyal companions. As time passed, the complete disintegration of the family seemed to cause a barely perceptible shift in her violent father's demeanor. Once, driven by a hunger she could no longer endure, she mustered all the courage she possessed to speak up about her needs. Instead of flying into a rage, her father actually took her to the general store in town. It was there that she felt the first faint glimmer of kindness from the outside world. The kind shop owner, Mabel, saw through her embarrassment and hunger, gently telling her that a child like her should be in school, where lunch is provided for free. The descriptions of food that Kaya had never even seen before made her heart flutter with longing. However, she looked down at her mud-stained, shoeless feet and felt too ashamed to even offer a reply. Upon leaving, she discovered a shiny lollipop had been tucked into the bag of supplies. In that moment, a tiny spark of hope ignited within her, suggesting that perhaps the world outside wasn't entirely as terrifying as her father. Returning home, she dug out an old dress left behind by her mother and carefully smoothed out every wrinkle. The next day, she walked toward the town and that legendary school all by herself and completely barefoot. However, reality delivered a freezing blow the moment she arrived. She stood out as someone who simply did not belong in that environment. The scent of the marsh clinging to her, her ill-fitting old dress, and her timid gaze all became targets for her classmates' mocking whispers. The place she had entered with such high expectations ended up giving her nothing but malice and profound loneliness. She sprinted back to the safety of the marsh and never set foot in a school again. The invisible barrier separating her from the outside world grew taller and thicker from that day forward. To her slight relief, her father no longer seemed as unpredictable as he once was. One day, he went so far as to give Kaya an old backpack, as if he were clumsily attempting to mend something broken between them. This sudden gift left Kaya feeling overwhelmed by the unexpected warmth. However, this fragile piece was as fleeting as a night-blooming flower. A letter from her mother eventually arrived at the marsh. Since Kaya couldn't read yet, she clutched the letter and desperately begged her father to read the words aloud to her. After reading the contents, her father's face twisted back into that familiar, sinister expression. He pulled out a lighter, and despite Kaya's terrified pleas, set the letter on fire without a moment of hesitation. The flames swallowed the paper, and with it, they consumed every tangible memory of her mother that Kaya had left. She silently knelt down and gathered every bit of the warm ash, placing it into a small glass jar to be cherished forever. Meanwhile, her father cursed as he burned every last remnant of her mother's belongings before vanishing into the marsh, never to return. Young Kaya was left to face the world entirely on her own. At night, when the fear kept her from sleeping, she would drag her bedding into the living room and force herself to drift off amidst the sounds of insects. Before dawn, she would head into the marsh to dig for mussels, later rowing her boat to bring the heavy harvest to the town's general store.
You want some?
Mr. Jumpin', I here tell y'all about mussels. I got some here.
With the help of the kind Mabel and her husband, Kaya managed to trade her mussels for the food and supplies she needed to survive. Thus, in the eyes of others, the deadly and silent marsh became the only home that truly accepted and embraced her. She grew up in the company of birds and flowers, eventually becoming the mysterious and eccentric Marsh Girl spoken of by the townspeople. The quiet years were eventually broken by a poetic and mysterious signal. In her usual outdoor haunts, different colored feathers began appearing on a tree stump day after day. One day, several practical gifts appeared alongside the feathers, including a spark plug for her boat, a packet of seeds, and a note with a friendly greeting. Sensing a consistent and silent kindness, she ran home to pluck a feather from her own collection as a return gift, only to run right into the young man who was leaving the offerings. Tate was the son of a local fisherman, and they had crossed paths a few times during their childhood. In fact, it was he who had guided her home once when she was lost. This connection from the past helps Kaya lower her guard.
Oh, all I said was I had seen you a couple times when I was out fishing, and it got me thinking that maybe you could use some seeds and a spark plug. I had extra. Thought it might save you a trip to town.
Since she didn't quite know how to socialize, the initial atmosphere was somewhat awkward. Tate gently proposed that he could teach her how to read and write, and just like that, Kaya became his student. Tate proved to be an incredibly patient teacher, and Kaya quickly lost herself in the wondrous new world constructed by words. As time went on, their meetings became more and more frequent. Kaya's incredible learning speed often left Tate in a state of pure admiration. During one visit to her shack, Tate was stunned to discover that this girl possessed a masterful talent for painting the natural world. To Kaya, every living thing in the marsh was her direct teacher, and perhaps that talent flowed through her as a gift from her mother. She wanted to understand why her family had left her and learn the survival laws of the animal kingdom. So, with Tate's help, she began to tirelessly study various biology books. They shared a soulful connection rooted in their love for the marsh, and through their time together, romantic feelings began to quietly bloom. On a clear autumn afternoon under falling leaves, the emotions they had been building finally broke through, culminating in a natural and tender kiss. Kaya was the first to bravely confirm their relationship.
Do you want to be?
I know feathers. But the other girls don't know feathers.
This sincere and pure connection allowed her to experience the feeling of being truly seen and loved once again. She was like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon, displaying a radiant smile that had only ever appeared when she was with her mother. Seasons rotate silently within the marsh as the years pass by, bringing changes to everything, including Kaya's once isolated world. On this day, Tate receives his long-awaited university acceptance letter. Before departing, he hands Kaya a carefully organized list of publishers, representing the future he has envisioned for her. He makes a solemn promise never to forget her and vows to return in a month for Independence Day to watch the fireworks together on the sea. Despite having lived alone for years, this single month of separation makes Kaya realize for the first time what it feels like for days to pass like years. She can only soothe the turbulence in her heart by immersing herself deeply in her drawings. The long-anticipated Independence Day finally arrives. She puts on her most cherished dress, applies that precious lipstick left behind by her mother, and waits by the shore since the crack of dawn. Her eyes are lit with a burning sense of expectation. However, from the morning glow to the sunset, and until the dark sky erupts with brilliant fireworks, the person who made that promise never appears. She wonders why her life is always defined by the experience of loss. Anger and sorrow overwhelm her like a rising tide. Like a spiteful child, she tears up the manuscripts she worked on for years and throws them into the fireplace. Just as she is gasping for air in a fog of emotion, the cry of a Cooper's hawk outside briefly distracts her. She follows the sound to the beach to feed this friend from afar. The tide washes over the sand repeatedly, erasing her footprints and slowly smoothing over the scars in her heart. 5 years after Tate's departure, a resort developer sets their sights on her small shack. To save her home, she must pay off years of accumulated property taxes. At this point, she finally sets aside her last bit of hesitation and digs out that dusty list of publishers. Using her exquisite and stunning brushstrokes, she shows the world the vibrant and mysterious reality of the marsh, and she quickly receives recognition and payment from a publisher. She finally pays her taxes and becomes the rightful owner of this land. One day, while sketching by the sea, a man named Chase notices her. He is a popular figure in the small town. After that encounter on the beach, he begins to shower Kaya with attention. Initially, Kaya has a decent impression of him. He knows and praises her real name, Kaya, instead of using the discriminatory label, Marsh Girl. Chase offers a warm invitation, and Kaya accepts. He enters her life and even takes her to the top of an abandoned fire lookout tower. Kaya is frightened by the dilapidated steps, but she is soon conquered by the breathtaking panoramic view of the marsh. The scenery reveals a brand new side of her familiar old friend. However, the seemingly considerate Chase always finds ways to elevate himself in conversation, as if placing himself in the superior position of a savior. Once, he visits Kaya's shack unannounced. The untidy sketches and plates in the house make Kaya feel embarrassed, while Chase patrols the room like a lord, subtly enjoying the control he has over her discomfort before quickly masking it as pure affection. Kaya cannot clearly define her feelings for Chase. Perhaps his appearance simply fills the emotional void of constant loss in her life, making her feel less lonely for a while. In this relationship, she remains passive and confused, letting Chase lead the way. Just as they fall deeply into this romance, Tate returns. Witnessing the two together, he intends to leave quietly, but he accidentally overhears Chase bragging and using insulting language about Kaya's body. Unable to endure it, Tate steps forward and has a violent confrontation with Chase. The dispute is eventually stopped by the shop owner, Jumpin'. That night, Tate finds Kaya to warn her about Chase's true character. However, with the pain of being abandoned still fresh in her mind, Kaya refuses to listen and instead vents her years of resentment by throwing stones at him. Tate finally confesses in agony that he missed their date because he naively thought Kaya would never leave the marsh, while he couldn't give up the outside world. Only after truly leaving did he realize that without Kaya, nothing else had any meaning. He seeks to make amends for his past mistakes, holding out a feather that once served as a symbol of their trust and their pact. Kaya takes the feather but does not grant him forgiveness. Even if everything Tate said is true, this realization has come too late, as the cracks in her heart have long been covered by years of isolation and new encounters. A few days later, Kaya goes to town for supplies and runs right into Chase's fiancé. Yet another blatant betrayal leaves her heart aching so much she can barely breathe. Chase later chases her to her house to explain, but Kaya quickly hides from him. Chase drops his disguise and storms into her shack in a rage, violently kicking and smashing her belongings. In that violent shadow, Kaya sees the image of her father, and all her painful memories become vivid once again. But this time, she does not stay down. Repeated losses and betrayals have taught her that people never stay forever. After the success of her first book, she uses her earnings to buy new furniture and bring electricity to the shack, perfecting her own little world. However, Chase now views Kaya as his exclusive prey that cannot be allowed to escape. Taming the feared Marsh Girl into a submissive kitten gives him a twisted sense of accomplishment. The wild side the marsh gave to Kaya is revealed as she bravely resists and gives him a stern warning, yet she still has to be on constant guard against his relentless harassment. Chase escalates his behavior, frequently harassing her and even damaging the home she worked so hard to build. Kaya often feels unsafe even staying in her own house, wondering when this life of constant fear will end. She rejects Tate's offer to help, having already formed a plan of her own. She decides to head to the city to meet her publisher, and then resolve the issue with Chase once and for all. Before she leaves, Tate worries she will catch a cold and gives her his red knitted hat. The next day, Kaya carefully copies the long-distance bus schedule at the general store. Jumpin notices the bruises on her face and angrily wants to confront Chase.
You can't tell anybody. You know how it is. They drag me into the sheriff's office and make me describe it to a bunch of men. And then write me up in the papers accusing me of whoring.
A few days later, she applies makeup to cover her scars and boards the earliest bus to the city under the prying eyes of the locals. She successfully meets with her editor and stays at a hotel for the night. After having breakfast the next morning, she hurries back to the town. These are all her publicly known movements around the time of the incident. Now, she sits in court facing the charge of first-degree murder. Tom argues passionately in her defense. The rising and falling tides would naturally wash away footprints on the beach, and the fire tower's poor condition was common knowledge. As former intimate lovers, it isn't strange that a red fiber from Kaya's hat would be found on Chase's clothes. The biggest mystery of the case is the disappearance of the shell necklace around Chase's neck, a token of love given to him by Kaya. Chase's mother insists her son was still wearing the necklace when he left the house.
He had that necklace on when he had dinner with us that night. And it was gone from his body. And what I'm saying is he never took it off. Whoever killed him took it.
Objection, Your Honor. It's speculation.
Sustained.
Tom sharply points out that the police searched Kaya's home and found no trace of the necklace. Most importantly, Kaya has a solid alibi. The case finally reaches its verdict, and after 6 hours of intense deliberation, the judge delivers the sentence.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Catherine Danielle Clark, not guilty of first-degree murder of Mr. Chase Andrews.
Kaya cannot wait to return to her home deep in the marsh, as if reuniting with a long-lost friend. Subsequently, her books are published one after another, making her a respected naturalist. Later on, she and Tate eventually find their way back to one another, but she never actually accepts his proposal. She doesn't need a worldly contract to define their relationship. Tate is more like a follower and companion of her soul. They understand each other, recording the life of the marsh together through every sunrise and sunset. On the day she senses her life is nearing its end, she rows her boat alone through the waterways of the marsh. Nature gave her everything, and she chooses to return to its embrace. In a daze, she seems to see her mother's silhouette on the path she watched so many times. Her mother is wearing the same plain clothes she wore when she left, walking with light steps and a gentle gaze. The maternal love she missed in childhood was her only regret in life. Finally, she passes away peacefully, having reconciled with that regret. After Kaya's death, Tate follows her wishes by organizing all her manuscripts and data to be donated to a university laboratory. A heavy sketchbook catches his eye, recording the small details of their early years together. But as he flips through the pages, Tate's expression gradually freezes. He sees a drawing of a female praying mantis confronting and then devouring a male. This is immediately followed by a portrait of Chase. When he turns to the next page, the legendary missing shell necklace is carefully hidden and pasted between the layers of the paper. A look of shocked understanding flashes in Tate's eyes. After a long silence, he closes the album, takes the necklace to the water, and gently tosses it back into the depths of the marsh. He hides this secret forever within this wetland that both embraces and devours everything.